Okay, this is the ultimate use case tests for me in the big screen Beyond. Do I still believe that this is a superior headset for me than the Pimax 8KX? Yeah, 100%. 100%. The reason why I bought it was because of all of the glass cockpits in both Microsoft Flight Simulator and also in DCS World, and the challenge I had in the Pimax 8KX and all headsets before that, so the Pimax 5KX and the Oculus Rift CV1, was that it was impossible, or well, virtually impossible to read the glass displays. You could read perhaps the larger font, that's in probably font size 10, font size 12, it's probably font size 12 to be honest, 12, 13, but anything that was in font size 10, 9, 8, what looks like 7, it was impossible, it was illegible. And instantly as I sit here in the cockpit, I'm not leaning forward, I'm sat upright, straight away I am seeing the benefits of the clarity that a big screen Beyond gives in vision. So without leaning forwards, I can read the dash. So I'm going to start top left, move across to the right, and then come down, move across, then come down to the lower panel. We've got circuit breakers, and see how much of that I can read without leaning forwards, and then how much I need to lean forwards to read, which in real life would be a requirement for me anyway. I wear glasses. I've got a slight prescription. I'm slightly I think farsighted. So anyway, let's do this. So top left across, so obviously I can read the do not touch screens. Actually, I'm going to move up above the dash and I'm going to look at the compass, and on the compass I can top left see that the first letter is an N. I can't really read the numerics that go across to the right, and then what's written in what looks like script is difficult to read. Obviously the compass rose is completely legible. It is clear. So I think even in real life I'd probably have to lean in a bit, but as soon as I get to here I can read it. I can read that obviously it says north, and then it's 030 degrees, 060 degrees, then it's east 120 degrees, 150 degrees. Below that it then has what you would have as your true heading, 365 or 36. Oops. Just as I started reading, the sunlight came over the top right shoulder and there's glare across it, so I can't read it. So 36, I want to make sure I'm not making it up, it's 359, yeah. So 359, 218, that takes a bit of leaning in, but I can read it clearly from here. 359, 28, 60, 89, 124, and then the last one is difficult, but it's less about being able to make it out, more because it's like handwritten script. But below it, I can read that it says radio, on, no, tiny font at the top. I can't quite make out what that very first line in what is definitely like font 6, can't read that. But anyway, below the dash, then below the screen, do not touch screens, obvious, and then above the glass display on the left, maneuvering speeds 105 knots on the left, warning, assure that some of it's missing because of the bevel edge of the screen, so I'd have to move to the left, but assure that all contaminants including water are removed from fuel and fuel system before flight. Failure to assure contaminants free fuel and need all safety instructions and owner advisories prior to flight can result in bodily injury or death. Below that it then says warning, assure that seat is locked in position prior to takeoff and landing. Failure to properly latch seat and need all safety instructions. Heed all safety instructions can result in bodily injury or death. We then look at the actual glass display. I can read on the screen, obviously at the top says Garmin, we all know that. But in the left hand column, the buttons, so below nav, obviously we have heading, below heading, left to right, the buttons are AP, autopilot, FD, flight director, then heading, altitude, nav. There's a bit, I've got some contrast blurring going on, but I think that's because I need to turn down the brightness, or the shadows are playing around in the cockpit. Let me get some light on it. But then we have approach, we have back course, we then have vertical speed. Below that, we then have flight level change, then the altitude knob on the dash, which is where usually I would struggle. Top left to right is nav 1 and 2, 113.900, 110.50, then India Lima Golf Alpha, and then for nav 2, it's the same. Across the top in the middle, we have distance, no numerics in there, nautical miles, bearing, that's all legible. And then the right hand side, the com stack is the same, so 127.600, 124.850, com1, com2 have the same information. All of that I can read clearly without having to lean forwards. And then on the actual display, you can see obviously the airspeed at the top 130 down to 80, but below that I can read without leaning in. I still have that bit of contrast blurring, but I know that that's probably because of the brightness settings that I need to change. But I can see that it says true airspeed, and so TAS and Tango Alpha Sierra 108 knots, Kilo Tango. To the right of that we have a headwind. It's about 8 knots coming from 102. I can read that. Above that, heading 360. You can obviously the 1, 3, 4, 2, 4, 6, 7, 150 heading on the course, or the heading rows I should say. I can read everything in the middle of that compass rows. It's all legible. On the right for altitude 290 at the top. Below that we have 1013. Whoa, what happened here? Hectopascals. That was a huge. Oh, I know, the game hadn't registered my rudder pedals and I touched it, so it does that really violent maneuver, because they're not rudder pedals, they're actually just Fanatec V3s. So yeah, so I can read the hectopascals of 1013 really clearly, don't need to lean forwards. Below that on the bottom we have outside air temperature 10 degrees, and then MAP or HSI, and then we've got PFD optimized, and then CDI, ADFDME, transponder, ident, and then we have time, reference, then we've got nearest, and then we've got alerts. All of that I can read. As I said, reading the second MFD on the right, looking at the engine instrumentation, that would be so difficult, almost impossible to read in the previous headsets. And from here again, without leaning in, I can read. So we're at 2,620 on our RPM. Below that we've got fuel flow in gallons per hour, so Foxtrot Lima Oscar Whiskey Golf Papa Hotel. I can read that. Below that I can read oil pressure, oil temp, EGT Echo Golf Tango for exhaust gas temperature. Below that I can read VAC Victor Alpha Charlie for the VAC, and then below that fuel quantity in gallons. I can read that, and this is where there is still that element of some blurriness, because again that side of the cockpit is in a bit of shadow. But again, I would expect to have to lean in anyway in reality to see what that says. So the fact that sitting here without leaning forwards, I can do the can you read the bottom line optical exam test, and I can make out enough to see that it says fuel quantity in gallons at bottom instrument display, and it's 0 and it's 1020. Is that right? Yes. And that was without leaning in, and then just leaning in to confirm. And then we've got engine hours, we've got, is that 10.5? Yes. So, and then below that we then have electrical, and in the middle, this is harder to clearly make out without leaning in, but without leaning in, I know, making out the shapes, that it's aux, volts, battery, and then the bottom amps. So the bottom one, I'm going to admit, I can see the A, I can see the S, I can now discern what is obviously a P, but it's not crystal clear. Again, it's like reading the bottom line of your eye exam. However, so what I would also say is, sat in the cockpit, what I'm much more cognizant of now in these lighting conditions is I can see the glare that people have been vocally complaining about with regards to the big screen. So if I look to the left and I look at that cloud formation, I look at the reflection in the cockpit window, I don't notice the glare, because the glare is superimposed on the cloud, so I don't see it. I don't see the glare at all. Over here, where I can see the rainbow and I can see the reflection of the light and the cockpit glass, I don't see the glare. I don't notice it. It's only when I look in my peripheral vision outside of the sweet spot, which again, people have called out the sweet spot. I again will say, because of my lenses, I have varifocals in real life. I've had to get used to doing this. If you want to focus on something and you want to see it clearly, you have to look at it. People that wear varifocals will understand. The optician will say, have you worn them before? And you'll say, no. They say, you might need to come back to be trained on how to use your varifocal lenses. And you think to yourself, do I look stupid? I can look outside and look through a lens. I don't need help with that. You put your glasses on for the first time, and then you intuitively do what you would normally do, and you glance left and right with your eyes. You don't move your head. And as soon as you look outside the sweet spot of your varifocals, your peripheral vision, you realize everything's just blurry. So I'm doing that now. If I look glancing without moving my head, everything around the outer edge is really blurry, and the glare is just completely there right in your face. You can't ignore it. But it's because I've got used to just looking straight ahead and looking at what I want to focus on. I don't notice a sweet spot. It wasn't until I read other people's reviews, or I watched other people's reviews, that I even realized or even became aware that there is a sweet spot. You'll note, if you watch my first impressions video, that I said there isn't a sweet spot. I don't see one, but that's because I never glance. I'm so used to never glancing. So for me, everything is clear. As far as I'm concerned, the entire lens is the sweet spot. But it's not true. If you glance left, you glance right, you don't move your head, the sweet spot is, as others have said, actually quite small. But I think that is a behavior now. That's when, this is where I'm going to say something that might be contentious, because it's my opinion. Anybody who has never had to use varifocals will just note that there is a small sweet spot, and they'll think that the way the lenses have been manufactured or fashioned or designed is a quote-unquote fail, that this lets the BigScreen Beyond down when compared to headsets that have a wider field of view. Anybody who's worn varifocals, I'm going to make a huge assumption here, but anybody who has worn or is currently wearing varifocals and has their lens inserts in will probably say, don't know what you're talking about. What sweet spot? What's the issue? It looks perfectly fine to me. But that's just because we now have a muscle memory that we've had to make habitual, where we no longer rely just on glances. We have had to get used to, like learning to walk again, we have had to get used to making a concerted effort to look at what you're looking for. So there's a similar, I think, behavior and muscle memory learning that goes on for people that use Track IR. If you have never used Track IR and you use it for the first time, you're extremely conscious of the fact that if you want to look over your right shoulder, you have to move your head to the right, move your head to the left to look over your left shoulder, but you can't look at your flat screen in front of you anymore, so you can't see the benefit of looking over your shoulder. So you have to get used to looking to the right of your head and looking left with your eyes. looking left with your head, looking right with your eyes. So you build up a new muscle memory of slightly look away from where your head is turning to maintain contact with the screen in front of you, but use your head to change your focal, your field of view, to the left or to the right. And that's what I think using a BigScreen Beyond is similar to. For people that have varifocals, you just know, look straight ahead and move your head. For those who've never worn them, you haven't had to learn that yet. So you notice straight away if you do what's normal and you can't, yeah, you've got a tiny field of view. So in summary, do I still believe that this is a superior headset for me than the Pimax 8KX? Yeah, 100%. 100%. Like, my second impression is I'd have no regrets. The headset does exactly what I want, exactly what I needed. I can finally sit in a glass cockpit and I can read everything clearly. So, comments below if you've now finally received your BigScreen Beyond. Is it what you anticipated, what you hoped for? Is it a disappointment? Do you notice the glare? Do you notice the small sweet spot? Are you a varifocal lens wearer and agree with me that yes, you now have the muscle memory, so you never ever notice the sweet spot? Or are you a varifocal lens wearer and you completely disagree with me and you think, nope, I can still notice the sweet spot? So do you find it comfortable to wear, uncomfortable to wear? Let me know. Comment below, and I would appreciate the likes, I'd appreciate the subscriptions even more, and I would be unbelievably grateful if you went as far as to share. I'll see you in the next video.